Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
So as I stand here tonight, breathing a big sigh of relief, thank you, Iowa.
And tonight, while the results are still not known, it looks like we are in a virtual tie. Iowa has begun tonight is a political revolution.
Bernie Sanders declares a virtual tie with Hillary Clinton in the Iowa caucuses. Sanders was once 40 points behind Clinton in the polls. It now looks like they'll split Iowa's delegate votes for the Democratic nomination. On the Republican side, an upset victory for Texas Senator Ted Cruz over frontrunner Donald Trump.
Tonight is a victory for the grassroots. Tonight is a victory for courageous conservatives across Iowa and all across this great nation.
Iowa, we love you. We thank you. You're special. We will be back many, many times. In fact, I think I might come here and buy a farm.
Donald Trump had led the Iowa polls for months, but a strong turnout of evangelicals helped give Cruz the win. Now the presidential primary turns to New Hampshire. We'll talk on Iowa and what's next with John Nichols of The Nation and longtime Hillary Clinton supporter Ellen Chesler. Then the road to the White House might begin in Iowa, but it's that road already bought and sold to big donors. We'll look at the intersection of money and politics in the 2016 campaign with Lee Fang of The Intercept. He recently asked Hillary Clinton if she'll release the transcripts of her lucrative speaking engagements for Goldman Sachs. Her response? Laughter.
Hi, Secretary Clinton, will you release a transcript of your paid speeches to Goldman Sachs?
All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The Iowa caucuses saw an upset victory for Republican Senator Ted Cruz over frontrunner Donald Trump, while a virtual tie between Hillary Clinton and rival Bernie Sanders. The latest returns show Clinton leading Sanders by less than half a percentage point, a result that would split Iowa's delegate votes for the Democratic nomination. Addressing supporters, Sanders said Iowa has begun a political revolution.
I think the people of Iowa have sent a very profound message to the political establishment, to the economic establishment, and, by the way, to the media establishment. The powers that be, Wall Street with their endless supply of money, corporate America, the large campaign donors, are so powerful that no president can do what has to be done alone. And that is why what Iowa has begun tonight is a political revolution.
Sanders was able to catch up with Clinton in Iowa despite polls once showing him 40 points behind. There were a number of coin tosses when there were unequal delegates to divide between Clinton and Bernie Sanders, and each one Clinton won. If Sanders had won those coin tosses, he would have won. On the Republican side, Ted Cruz upset Donald Trump with the help of a strong evangelical turnout. Cruz called his win a victory for the grassroots.
Tonight is a victory for the grassroots. Tonight is a victory for courageous conservatives across Iowa and all across this great nation. Tonight, the state of Iowa has spoken.
Marco Rubio came in a close third after Trump, but Ted Cruz won. We'll have more on Iowa after headlines. The World Health Organization has declared the Zika virus an international public health emergency. While the virus itself is usually not life-threatening, it appears to be linked to microcephaly, which causes babies to be born with abnormally small heads. Microcephaly also causes a host of other problems, including seizures, developmental delays, hearing loss, and vision problems. The World Health Organization says the Zika virus is, quote, spread spreading explosively and that up to 4 million people in the Americas could be infected by the end of the year. WHO Director General Dr. Margaret Chan spoke out at a news conference in Geneva.
I am now declaring that the recent cluster of microcephaly and other neurological abnormalities reported in Latin America, following a similar cluster of French Polynesia in 2014, constitutes a public health emergency of international concern.
Scientists have linked rising temperatures from global warming to the increased incidence of mosquito-borne infections such as Zika. A Saudi military spokesman has acknowledged Saudi Arabia bombed Doctors Without Borders hospital in Yemen in October. Saudi Arabia had previously denied the October 27th airstrike, which injured one person and completely destroyed the small hospital in Sada province, leaving an estimated 200,000 people without access to a medical facility. The U.S.-backed Saudi-led coalition has been accused of carrying out multiple attacks on health facilities in Yemen in recent months. In January, an airstrike destroyed another hospital supported by Doctors Without Borders, killing at least 6 patients and staff. Doctors Without Borders Executive Director Jason Cohn has accused Saudi Arabia of waging the ongoing war in Yemen with, quote, utter disregard for international humanitarian law. In Afghanistan, a Taliban suicide attack near a police complex in Kabul has killed at least 20 police officers and wounded dozens more. It's the latest in a growing string of Taliban attacks in the capital. This comes as U.S. military officials confirm Afghan soldier and police casualties were up by nearly a third in 2015. U.S. military officials are increasing pressure on the Obama administration to change its rules to give U.S. forces a larger role in military operations in Afghanistan. In Guatemala, 2 former military officers are on trial for crimes of sexual and domestic slavery and forced disappearance perpetrated against indigenous Mayan women in 1982 during the U.S.-backed Dirty Wars. A 1999 UN-backed Truth Commission report found the Guatemalan military systematically used rape as a weapon of terror during the decades-long war. But this is the first time any individual officers have faced trial related to these crimes. The trial, which opened Monday, comes after decades of organizing by the defendants who say they were forced into sexual slavery for months in the small village of Sepazarco in eastern Guatemala. They say they were required to report for 12-hour shifts during which soldiers forced them to clean, cook, and submit to routine gang rapes. The defendants are now in their 70s and 80s. Ada Valenzuela of the collective Breaking the Impunity called the trial an historic step.
This is a symbolic and historic case that marks a first, not only in the history of Guatemala, but also in the world, because it is the first time a national tribunal has tried a case of sexual violence, sexual slavery, and domestic slavery as crimes of war, which were committed during the armed civil conflict in Guatemala.
International academics are raising concern about the crackdown against their Turkish colleagues who've signed a petition denouncing the Turkish military's violent crackdown on Kurdish communities. The petition, entitled "We Will Not Be a Party to This Crime," has been signed by more than 2,000 professors, including Noam Chomsky, Judith Butler, David Harvey. In response, Turkish President Erdogan has verbally attacked the professors. Turkish security forces have arrested more than 24 professors on charges of spreading terrorism propaganda. In New York City, dozens of academics held a news conference to call attention to the crackdown. Columbia University professor Marianne Hirsch spoke out.
That was signed by over 2,000 people, "We will not be a party to this crime," merely asked the government to observe national and international law and to initiate a peace process with the populations of Southeast Anatolia in this Kurdish-dominated region that they have been targeting with major acts of persecution. Almost immediately, the signatories of this petition were targeted by the Turkish government, and they were accused, as we've been hearing, of terrorist propaganda, investigated by their universities, and otherwise harassed.
This comes as a top UN human rights official is urging Turkey to investigate a report that the army opened fire on unarmed civilians in the majority Kurdish town of Cizre. The shooting was captured on film by Turkish journalist Refik Tekin. The video appears to show security forces shooting at a group of unarmed people, some of whom are carrying white flags. At least 2 people were said to be killed. The journalist is now facing arrest on charges of belonging to a terrorist organization. A United Nations working group says the United States should consider reparations to African Americans whose ancestors were enslaved as part of the transatlantic slave trade. The UN working group of experts on people of African descent released its recommendations after spending a week meeting with African Americans across the United States, including in Baltimore, Chicago, New York City, D.C., and Jackson, Mississippi. The fact-finding mission's chair, Marie Fanon-Mendez, France, said, quote, "The legacy of enslavement, racial subordination and segregation, racial terrorism, and racial inequality in the U.S. remains a serious challenge, as there has been no real commitment to reparations and to truth and reconciliation for people of African descent." In news from Africa, a new report warns of continued violence and economic decline in South Sudan, which has been gripped by bouts of civil war since 2013. The report cites at least 5 violations of the ceasefire, which took effect more than a year ago. Since 2013, thousands have died in the conflict, and famine is widespread. South Sudan is the world's newest country. It gained independence from Sudan in 2011. In India, the Supreme Court has begun hearings in a case that could strike down a colonial-era law that criminalizes sex between gay, lesbian, and transgender adults. The law, known as Section 377, was ruled unconstitutional in 2009, but it was reinstated in 2013. Hundreds of people report being arrested under the law. Activists also say there's been a surge of attacks against gay, lesbian, and transgender people since the law was reinstated. The Department of Human Services has announced it will revoke the license of the Burks Family Detention Center in Pennsylvania. This comes after a lengthy campaign by a coalition of grassroots organizations to shut down the controversial Family Detention Center, which has housed thousands of parents and children seeking U.S. asylum. Burks is one of only 3 family detention centers in the United States. To see our recent report on the Burks Family Detention Center from Democracy Now! Criminal Justice correspondent Renee Feltz, go to democracynow.org. In Burns, Oregon, as many as 500 people faced off yesterday in competing protests over the ongoing armed occupation of the Federal Wildlife Reserve. On January 2nd, a right-wing anti-government militia took over the wildlife refuge in support of 2 ranchers sentenced to prison for setting fires that burned federal land. The ranchers later turned themselves into authorities, but militia members continued their occupation despite the protest of local residents. On Monday, both residents opposed to the occupation and some of their supporters rallied in front of the Harney County Courthouse during a tense standoff that lasted more than 2 hours. There are reportedly only 4 remaining militia members continuing the armed occupation. In Kansas, a U.S. military veteran is fighting to regain custody of 5 of his children after Kansas took them into child custody last year over his use of medical marijuana. Raymond Schwab says he treats his PTSD and chronic pain with homemade cannabis butter. Last April, he and his wife were preparing to move to Colorado, where marijuana use is legal. But before they could finish the move, the Schwabs say the state of Kansas took their 5 youngest children into state custody on suspicion of child endangerment. Even though the state later found these allegations to be unsubstantiated, Schwab says Kansas is requiring him to provide 4 months of drug-free urine tests to get his children back. A Palestinian village has been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Israel is throwing open its doors to refugees. Well, those headlines, at least according to a fake version of the New York Times that's being distributed across New York City today. The prank copy of the revered Gray Lady also says Democratic presidential candidate, quote, Hilarity Clifton, plans to quit the presidential race and instead head up a women's nonprofit based in Ramallah on the West Bank. The edition even has fake ads. It's not yet clear who is behind the prank. The group The Yes Men pulled off a similar prank in 2008. And civil rights lawyer Myron Beldock has died. Throughout the course of his legal career, Beldock championed the cases of those who had been discriminated against by the justice system. He's best known for defending Yusuf Salaam, one of the 5 teenagers falsely convicted in the 1989 Central Park jogger case. He also defended former boxer Reuben Hurricane Carter, who served 19 years in prison for 3 murders in New Jersey before Beldock helped win his freedom. Beldock died Monday in Manhattan at the age of 86. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The Iowa caucuses saw an upset victory for Republican Senator Ted Cruz over frontrunner Donald Trump, while a virtual tie between Hillary Clinton and rival Bernie Sanders. The latest returns show Clinton leading Sanders by less than half a percentage point, a result that would split Iowa's delegate votes for the Democratic nomination. Sanders was able to catch up with Clinton in Iowa despite polls showing him at least 40 points behind. 4 in 10 caucus goers voted for the first time, a segment that overwhelmingly favored Sanders. More than 1 in 4 Democratic voters listed income inequality as the election's top issue. Some Democratic caucus sites decided their winner with a coin toss. In all 6 situations, Clinton won. While Democrats waited anxiously for the results late into the night, the Republican contest was decided earlier. Texas Senator Ted Cruz upset national frontrunner Donald Trump despite Trump's dominance in the polls for months. Florida Senator Marco Rubio came in just behind Trump. Cruz won in a race that saw a record Republican turnout for Iowa and a strong showing of evangelical voters. Cruz also took Iowa despite opposing ethanol subsidies favorable to local corn growers, a stance that led Iowa Republican Governor Terry Branstad to openly oppose him. On the Democratic side, Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley announced he will suspend his campaign after attracting just 0.6% of the Iowa vote. O'Malley has floated a presidential run since 2013, but failed to gain traction with Democratic voters. For Republicans, former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee also announced he's suspending his campaign. We begin today's show with highlights from Iowa. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders finished the night in a virtual tie with Hillary Clinton, but sounded like a winner in his speech to supporters last night.
Months ago, we came to this beautiful state. We had no political organization. We had no money. We had no name recognition. And we were taking on the most powerful political organization in the United States of America. And tonight, while the results are still not known, it looks like we are in a virtual tie. And the reason that we have done so well here in Iowa, the reason I believe we're going to do so well in New Hampshire and in the other states that follow, the reason is the American people are saying no to a rigged economy. They no longer want to see an economy in which the average American works longer hours for low wages, while almost all new income and wealth is going to the top 1%. What the American people understand is this country was based and is based on fairness, It is not fair when the top 1/10 of 1% today owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. It is not fair when the 20 wealthiest people in this country own more wealth than the bottom half of America. So are you guys ready for a radical idea? Well, so is America. And that radical idea is we are going to create an economy that works for working families, not just the billionaire class.
With a margin too close to call in the Democratic Iowa caucus, Hillary Clinton stopped short of claiming victory in her speech Monday night, though her campaign has issued a statement declaring she has won.
To the families and friends across this state, I am deeply grateful. We love you. Well, I love all of you. But here's what I want you to know. It is rare. It is rare that we have the opportunity we do now to have a real contest of ideas, to really think hard about what the Democratic Party stands for and what we want the future of our country to look like if we do our part to build it. I am a progressive who gets things done for people. I am honored to stand in the long line of American reformers who make up our minds that the status quo is not good enough, that standing still is not an option, and that brings people together to find ways forward that will improve the lives of Americans. I look back over the years of my involvement from that very first job I had at the Children's Defense Fund, and I know what we are capable of doing. I know we can create more good-paying jobs and raise incomes for hardworking Americans again. I know that we can finish the job of universal health care coverage for every single man, woman, and child. I know we can combat climate change and be the clean energy superpower of the 21st century. We can make our education system work for every one of our children, especially those who come with disadvantages. I know we can make college affordable and get student debt off the backs of young people. And I know we can protect our rights, women's rights, gay rights, voting rights, immigrant rights, workers' rights. Too, we can stand up to the gun lobby and get common sense gun safety measures. And how do we do that? We do that by securing the nomination, and then we do it by winning and going into that White House, as others before have, determined to push forward on the great goals and values that unite us as Americans.
In the Republican race, Texas Senator Ted Cruz pulled off an upset in the Iowa caucus, beating frontrunner Donald Trump with 28% of the vote to Trump's 24%. Cruz called it a victory for conservatives.
Tonight is a victory for the grassroots. Tonight is a victory for courageous conservatives across Iowa and all across this great nation. Tonight, the state of Iowa has spoken. Iowa has sent notice that the Republican nominee and the next president of the United States will not be chosen by the media. Will not be chosen by the Washington establishment. Will not be chosen by the lobbyists. but will be chosen by the most incredible, powerful force where all sovereignty resides in our nation, by we, the people, the American people. The last 7 years of having a president, having an attorney general that demonizes you, that vilifies you, that sides with the criminals and looters instead of the brave men and women of law enforcement, that will end on January 20th, 2017. So tonight, the state of Iowa, the Democrats here, seem to be in a virtual tie between one candidate who admits he's a socialist and the other candidate who pretends she's not. I wish them both luck. But I will tell you this, as Margaret Thatcher observed, the problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money. There is no force in Washington that can stand against the American people, that can stand against the grassroots, that can stand against our unity. We are going to do this together as a movement from the people. And I tell you tonight, Iowa has made clear to America and the world, morning is coming. Morning is coming.
Donald Trump went into the Iowa caucus leading in the Republican polls, attempted to downplay his second-place finish.
I was told by everybody, do not go to Iowa. You could never finish even in the top 10. And I said, but I have friends in Iowa. I know a lot of people in Iowa. I think they'll really like me. Let's give it a shot. They said, don't do it. I said, I have to do it. And we finished second. And I want to tell you something. I'm just honored. I'm really honored. And I want to congratulate Ted, and I want to congratulate all of the incredible candidates, including Mike Huckabee, who's become a really good friend of mine. So congratulations to everybody. Congratulations. And we're leaving tonight, and tomorrow afternoon we'll be in New Hampshire, and that'll be something special. It's going to be a great week, and we're going to be up here next week, and I think we're going to be proclaiming victory, I hope. I will say this. I don't know who's going to win between Bernie and Hillary. I don't know what's going to happen with Hillary. She's got other problems, maybe bigger than the problems she's got in terms of nominations. We will go on to get the Republican nomination, and we will go on to easily beat Hillary or Bernie or whoever the hell they throw up there. Iowa, we love you. We thank you. You're special. We will be back many, many times. In fact, I think I might come here and buy a farm. I love it, okay? Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you very much.
That was Donald Trump. Mike Huckabee has suspended his campaign. Florida Senator Marco Rubio came in third in the Republican Iowa caucus with 23% of the vote, behind Ted Cruz and Donald Trump. The result was well ahead of expectations, giving Rubio a boost going into New Hampshire.
Tonight here in Iowa, the people of this great state sent a very clear message. After 7 years of Barack Obama, we are not waiting any longer to take our country back. This is not a time for waiting. We are going to grow the conservative movement. We are going to take our message to the people who are struggling paycheck to paycheck, to the students living under the burden of student loans, to the families struggling to raise their children with the right values. We will take our message to them, and we will bring them to our side. When I am a nominee, we will unite our party, we will grow our party, and we will defeat Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders or whoever they nominate.
Marco Rubio coming in a close third in the Iowa caucus as the candidates move on to New Hampshire. When we come back, a discussion about what took place in Iowa and then the money behind the candidates. Stay with us.
Somebody say, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, we're gonna get you up out the chair. Well, DJ spinning on the wheels of steel like it ain't no thing because he is for real. He's cutting the jams with the wave of his hand. So fresh, it'll make you stand. You hear the highs in your eyes, the bass in your face. This super DJ can rock the place. You hear bass, highs, trembling tones. He be
Rockmaster Scott and the Dynamic Three performing The Roof is on Fire. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. With Iowa out of the way, the presidential contest now shifts to New Hampshire, which holds its primary a week from today. After New Hampshire comes contests in Nevada and South Carolina, followed by the delegate-rich Super Tuesday primaries on March 1st. Despite a turnout of only a few 100,000 voters and being one of the whitest states in the country, the fifth whitest to be exact, Iowa plays an outsized role as the first contest in a lengthy campaign that now begins 2 years before the eventual winner's inauguration. Although Bernie Sanders was able to tie Clinton in Iowa and leads her in the New Hampshire polls, he'll face a tougher challenge as the contest moves to the southern states. And Clinton already has a big advantage away from the voting booths, the support of several hundred superdelegates who vote based on their own preferences, not their party's state results. To discuss the Iowa results and look ahead to what's next, we're joined by two guests. Here in New York, Ellen Chesler is with us. She is a longtime supporter of Hillary Clinton, a senior fellow at the Roosevelt Institute. And in Des Moines, Iowa, John Nichols is a political writer for The Nation, which has endorsed Bernie Sanders. An updated version of his book, The S Word, A Short History of an American Tradition, Socialism, has just been published. His other books include Dollarocracy, How the Money and Media Election Complex is Destroying America. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! But, John, you are in Iowa right now. Describe what took place on both sides of the aisle.
Well, I don't know if you've got a couple hours, but a lot took place. It was really quite a remarkable night. And the important thing to begin with is the kind of disarray of the Republican race. It's fascinating what happened there. As of Monday morning, virtually everyone was talking about the likelihood of a Donald Trump win. Now we end up with not only Donald Trump not winning, but Trump almost falling into third place. The Cruz win is a big deal. It has established him as the leading pure conservative, for lack of a better term, the guy who will go hard to the right and likely attract the support not just of Mike Huckabee and Rick Santorum, but ultimately, depending on how this race goes forward, someone like a Ben Carson. But the interesting thing about what happened on the Republican side is that you didn't get rid of all the kind of mid-ticket candidates. If the results hold, and there's still some sorting out to do, but if the results hold as expected, Ted Cruz will win delegates, Donald Trump will win delegates, Marco Rubio, who ran far better than expected, will win delegates, Ben Carson will win delegates, and Rand Paul and Jeb Bush will win at least one delegate each. So, I mean, it's a very, very kind of ripped up field. I think a lot of people are going to go into New Hampshire. I think a nasty, nasty race, and it was ugly. Very expensive, and negative ads to the last minutes will go on in New Hampshire and perhaps a good deal beyond. Now, on the Democratic side, you had something that was very different. You know, a smaller field to begin with, and a pretty clear race between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, with Martin O'Malley really running a noble effort, touring the state, working hard, but never quite getting traction. O'Malley has now dropped out. But as you got to that final result, I can just tell you that I was in precincts last night, and it was a remarkable thing to watch. You had traffic jams, lines, pouring out of those precincts, and people of, kind of every background showing up. Now, I was in Des Moines, the most diverse city in Iowa, or at least one of the most diverse. And so I did see a real mix of people. I went to a precinct in an African-American neighborhood, and I saw immigrants, longtime residents, as well as students from nearby college. There were long lines, but people really were getting along with each other. I saw Hillary Clinton people helping Bernie Sanders people fill out their registration forms. And so the caucuses themselves were long and functional. The result, however, was wild. And I was in the headquarters of these candidates last night. It was a fascinating thing to watch because you just don't have this very often in politics, where, as the night goes on, you have a clear front runner, and Hillary Clinton was the clear front runner early in the evening. She had a 4 or 5 point lead. It looked like it would hold to what the polls had suggested. But as the night went on, it got closer and closer and closer till you ended up with this razor-thin result, which might go, by a tiny bit to Hillary Clinton, but I think I would suggest the Des Moines Register headline, "Dead Heat," is a pretty fair one. And what's significant about that, how it worked, and this will be the last bit of report I'll give you, at least on the caucuses themselves, is that the caucuses are complex. You can vote and re-vote if things are uncertain. You can reshuffle who's in them. And in some of these caucuses that were literally packed with people, especially new people, a lot of students, a lot of low-income folks, working-class folks, surprising number, at least in some of these places, immigrants who were participating for the first time, 17, 18-year-olds from high schools who are participating because they'll be old enough to vote in November and thus under the Iowa rules are allowed to be a part of it. All of these people, it just took time to make this all work. And you came down to this very close result. One of the reasons why Sanders closed the margin at the end, why it got closer and closer through the night, is that it was the precincts that had this incredibly boosted turnout of new voters that took the longest to count, because you often had a lot of forms to fill out, a lot of details to go through. But at the end of the night, you ended up with a situation where, fairly, I think, both Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders could claim a victory, at least a victory of sorts. And it's important to note, Hillary Clinton is the first woman to win the Iowa caucuses. This is a major breakthrough for a state that has not seen women get elected to some high offices even to this point. And then also, it's important to note that on the Republican side, you had children of immigrants, Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, running, first and third, and almost knocking out a billionaire in the second place. So pretty interesting results across the board.
So there are a lot of interesting numbers. I think the Republican figures are 182,000 Republican caucus goers turned out, breaking the record of 122,000 in 2012. I mean, by my calculation, that's 50% more people came out and voted in the Republican, and those votes are counted individually. We watch them, counting their paper ballots. Now, the Democrats are different. They don't count paper ballots. They caucus, and they choose delegates. Now, when you talk about this being extremely close, a virtual tie, can you explain, John, in 6 of these caucuses, they actually flipped a coin, and in every one of those, Hillary Clinton won? I mean, luck be a lady tonight.
Well, in fairness, as the caucuses I've seen, and I've been to caucuses going back for a quarter century, what happens is you let one campaign call it, right? And they call. And in these different caucuses, some places the Clinton person called, some places the Sanders person called. And then, if they get it, they get it. The problem of doing it any other way, Amy, is that they don't do that right away. When you get to the coin toss, you have allowed the campaigns to make their pitches, to talk to one another. This is not like voting. It's not like some secret process in the classic sense. Candidates or campaigners walk across the room. If you're a Hillary Clinton backer, you go to a Bernie Sanders backer, you say, hey, really, don't you want to come over and be with us? I know you, because these are in neighborhoods. They all go to the O'Malley backers and try to get them to come across. They then count who they've got, and maybe the Clinton people have got 41, the Sanders people have got 41. They say, hey, does anybody want to change? They allow for more debate. That's why some of these caucuses took a couple hours. And at the end of the day, if they cannot get people to break from their commitments, they flip the coin. It is an imperfect system, but frankly, people generally walk away accepting it. The one final element I will throw into this, Amy, is that in these caucuses, these people really do know one another. They are friends and neighbors, and interestingly enough, by and large, they're people who work together on campaigns in the fall. And so I think from the outside, a lot of people might expect a great deal of bitterness, and sometimes there can be that. But when I've been on the ground in these caucuses, and certainly last night, I saw people, arguing issues really passionately, arguing electability really passionately, but generally accepting the results.
I want to bring in Ellen Chesler to this discussion. Ellen, you've been a long-time Hillary Clinton supporter, just had a party for her. You've had parties for her at your house, supporting her, fundraisers.
Years ago, not this cycle. But...
talk about this razor-close finish. The campaign has declared victory, but clearly this is a virtual tie, and what it means.
I think it means that Hillary Clinton actually did quite well in Iowa, a state and in a process that rewards insurgency. You had a situation where she came in as the front runner, the quote-unquote establishment candidate, although let's remember that Bernie Sanders has been in government for 25 years, as long as she has, and that kind of makes him part of the establishment, too, as he defines it. But he clearly was the unknown. He's never passed a bill, doesn't have the kind of record. She's the international figure of renown, and the one who's been attacked for 25 years, too. Let's remember that. I mean, this is a woman who has been the subject of the attack machine on the right, and to some extent from the left. For a quarter of a century, and she more than held her own. And she held her own, and I put an emphasis on much of what John said, in a situation where the real divide, and this is what's fascinating to me, I'm Hillary Clinton's age, so I've been around a long time, the real divide is a generational divide here. He did well because he brought in a whole lot of new voters. The Times reported 171,000 caucus goers on the Democratic side. They don't cast ballots, so you don't know exactly if that number is true, but in that ballpark. He brought in a lot of new people under the age of 25, and that's a great thing for our democracy. And as somebody, who's at the end of my political career and started when I was that age myself in the 1960s, I really see the value of that, and I know the Clinton campaign does as well. And they voted, 9-1, and similarly for Bernie, and similarly, people of my age and even 45 to 65 voted 8-1 for her. And that divide was even greater than the gender divide or the class divide or whatever other divides. And I think that's a really interesting and cautionary tale. I mean, certainly for the Clinton campaign, which now needs to move forward and try to win over some of those supporters. And I think the positive tone of the campaign is really all about that. It's all about not antagonizing anybody. I mean, after all, we're choosing between two progressive candidates here. One may be more progressive, more clearly defined, between the haves and the have-nots, between Wall Street and Main Street and his definition of it. But if you actually look at her platform, as The Nation itself said in Michelle Goldberg's cover story, in which I was quoted a couple of months ago, is it already? This is the most progressive platform a Democrat's run since, Lyndon Johnson.
In fact, Hillary Clinton called herself a progressive last night when she spoke. John Nichols, do you think Bernie Sanders has had a major effect on Hillary Clinton's platform?
There's simply no question of that, and that's why you have primaries. I really share a lot of Ellen's views here, and I think that the one thing I would bring up very strongly is that there was a generational divide, and it's clear that these young folks were coming to vote for Bernie Sanders. I'd warn a lot of the national pundits that they weren't necessarily coming to vote against Hillary Clinton. Sanders made a remarkable connection with folks in Iowa, and it was rooted in a tremendous level of actual campaigning, something like 150 stops across the state. And part of that connection is an interesting one, which I don't think we begin to cover well at the national level. You got to get pretty down to the grassroots to hear this. But when I talked to these young folks who were coming, and also to just generally a lot of the folks who were backing Sanders, they were backing him not merely because of what has happened. It wasn't merely because of the economic downturn or the history of recent years, many of the economic concerns that we know about. There was also a great deal of concern about the future. And again, this went up, not above many of the young folks. And it was a concern that in an age of automation, in an age of radical transformation of our workplaces and our work life, that it was going to be pretty hard to have a future that will be as defined or maybe even as prosperous as their parents or grandparents. And so what I heard from an awful lot of folks was that they wanted someone in the presidency, in a position of power. They wanted someone at least at the lead in our politics who was going to watch out for them, who was going to make sure that the decisions made in those moments would be on behalf of the new immigrant, of the person working a $10 an hour job, of the single mom, of a whole bunch of folks who have been really badly harmed by our economic system. And what I heard was Sanders hitting that very, very early on, really connecting with a lot of that. But I also heard Hillary Clinton taking in a lot of these messages. And remember, she's worked on some of this stuff for decades, but also beginning to hear and connect with a lot of this as well. I think that the Iowa race has had a real impact on Hillary Clinton. I think her final speeches in Iowa were very populist, very economically focused. And my sense is that she did well, not merely because of her past, but because she, too, was listening and connecting and hearing. And as this race goes on, I would love it if one of these additional Democratic debates, and there will be additional Democratic debates, I would love it if one of them was just about the future, not about the past. Because I can tell you, in Iowa, that's what an awful lot of these, especially the young voters, were voting on.
Ellen Chesler.
Well, again, John and I are in agreement on a lot of things. In addition to the generational divide, if you looked at the analysis this morning, those who were more practically focused, who are policy wonkish, are the Clinton supporters, and young people who are idealists and who want a very sort of starry-eyed definition of the future tended towards Sanders. And I think what's going to happen now is a much more deeper dive into how Sanders believes he can realize his promises for the future. And that's going to play to Hillary's advantage because she's the one who's actually been there working things out.
Well, that's clearly what she's saying. She's saying, well, it may all look nice on paper, but how do you achieve it? But John Nichols, this question of whether she is a progressive, having voted for the war in Iraq, was on the board of Walmart for years, and most recently going after Bernie Sanders, saying he would take down Obamacare when Bernie Sanders was saying he wanted single payer. Last night, she started talking about universal health care, so I think he's having an effect there. But talk about that label, progressive, and what exactly it means.
Well, I mean, again, how many hours do you have? Because the label progressive has been pulled in an awful lot of ways. I'm from rural Wisconsin, and so I grew up with an understanding of progressivism as something that was to the left of liberal. It was a point of view that really did emphasize a lot of economic justice. They tended to be very anti-war, skeptical of wars. That's the Robert M. La Follette progressivism. And frankly, I think that's a place where Bernie Sanders would put himself, at least historically, as well as with a little bit of the New Deal FDR
But again,
vision.
John, where's the meat?
And so yeah. But, well, that's a great old question. And I am not, I'm not going to begin to suggest to you that I know exactly where this campaign will go. But I would caution on suggesting that Bernie Sanders will necessarily present himself as starry-eyed. I think that Ellen is right. In these next weeks, Bernie Sanders is going to have to lay out specifics. He's going to talk about budget issues, and he's going to talk about agenda and ideas. But at the core of what he's talking about, and we talked about this in the Nation editorial, or the editors did, is this concept that, you really do have to change our politics a lot. It's not just changing our governing. It's getting a very different politics that brings a lot of new people in. I think that's been Sanders' point. I think that Hillary Clinton is also recognizing that. And so my sense is that this campaign has already changed a great deal. I think it's moved immensely from where it began. And my sense is that the debates that come, which will be one-on-one debates because you've lost Martin O'Malley, which is too bad because he was actually a very wise contributor. But these debates that come, I think are going to go deep into those economic issues. They'll also focus a good deal on foreign policy. But as they do, I don't think it's going to be starry-eyed idealism versus, hard tax, veteran experience. I think you're going to see two people who have some different views, and I hope that that moderators of these debates and people that tweak it out and cover it will encourage them to explore those differences, not with bitterness or anger, but with a really deep debate about where the Democratic Party ought to go in the
And we're going to break for a minute, and we're going to bring Lee Fang into this conversation.
Yeah.
We're talking to John Nichols, political writer for The Nation, which has endorsed Bernie Sanders. Ellen Chesler is with us, a longtime supporter of Hillary Clinton, senior fellow at the Roosevelt Institute. Stay with us. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report, raging long by the knife here on Democracy Now! I'm Amy Goodman. The road to the White House might begin in Iowa, but in an era of unregulated campaign finance, that road may already have been sold to big donors. Spending by so-called dark money groups, political super PACs, and other organizations who can hide their funders is already far ahead of previous election cycles, with estimates it could reach up to $500 million. Dark money groups have already spent more than $200 million on political ads alone since 2015. Just this weekend, the billionaire Koch brothers held a retreat for their wealthy allies in Palm Springs to discuss political spending and strategy. The Koch's political network plans to spend nearly $900 million in 2016, about as much as Democrats and Republicans will spend on their presidential nominees. But they are not a party. We're joined by a reporter who's been following the money trail from the politicians at the podiums to the money in the shadows. Lee Fang is an investigative journalist at The Intercept, covering the intersection of money and politics. Lee Fang joining us from San Francisco. Still with us, John Nichols, political writer for The Nation, and Ellen Chesler, senior fellow at the Roosevelt Institute, editor of the book Women and Girls Rising, Progress and Resistance Around the World. Lee, talk about how money played a part in the Iowa caucus.
Well, Amy, money played a big role. We've seen television, radio, direct mail, just absolutely flooding the state, trying to convince voters to support certain candidates. In the last 2 weeks, we saw establishment Republican effort to sink Donald Trump. Our Principles PAC, we don't know the donors, but we know it's being led by a number of consultants formerly associated with Mitt Romney, doing negative ads against Donald Trump, and it looks like they had a great effect last night, bringing Donald Trump from the #1 spot for months to losing to Ted Cruz. But I think one of the bigger stories of the election last night is that in spite of all the big money, the negative ads, you saw candidates who actually kind of flipped the table on the money and campaign against it doing very well. Bernie Sanders was down by some 41% only 4 months ago, and as you mentioned earlier, fought this down to a draw, even though it looks like he was being outspent by the Hillary Clinton campaign. And he took time in his speech last night to really focus on the role of big money, calling out lobbyists, calling out the establishment, and even on the Republican side, Ted Cruz winning the election last night and hitting a lot of the same themes as Bernie Sanders in his victory speech, calling out the establishment Republicans, calling out lobbyists, and saying that his campaign was being charged by small donors. I will note that that's not true. Ted Cruz actually relied on big money donors, people giving as much as $10 million or $11 million to a super PAC. But I think it really speaks to the atmosphere, the political dynamics in Iowa today, that Ted Cruz took time to really claim that his campaign, like Bernie Sanders, was being fueled by small donors.
Lee Fang, last month you attempted to speak with Hillary Clinton after she addressed a town hall in Manchester, New Hampshire. You asked her if she would release the transcripts of her paid speeches to Goldman Sachs. She laughed and turned away. I want to go to that clip.
Hi, Secretary Clinton. Will you release a transcript of your paid speeches to Goldman Sachs? No, there's a lot of controversy over their speeches. Secretary. Is that a no? Secretary Clinton, will you release a transcript of your Goldman Sachs speeches? Yes.
So, Lee Fang, explain what happened and why you're raising this issue of what she was paid to make a speech or speeches at Goldman Sachs.
Well, Amy, since 2001, Bill and Hillary Clinton have earned over $115 million on the speaker circuit, going out to private corporations, foundations, special interest groups, and charging as much as $200,000, $300,000 per speech. I mean, this is really unprecedented in American history, that you have the leading candidate of a major party enriching themselves personally from special interest groups that have been lobbying them and will be lobbying them if they do win the White House. So there's been a lot of talk about, what these speeches actually entailed, and Hillary Clinton has defended herself, saying that, she's basically giving a boilerplate speech. She wants to have more education and more conversations, and this is healthy for our democracy. On the other hand, there have been reports that when Hillary Clinton has gone to some special interest groups, for example, she gave 3 speeches to Goldman Sachs, making over $600,000 from that one investment bank, that she gave a very specially tailored message saying that she's against all of this anti-bank populism. According to Politico, she reassured the bankers that she wouldn't be taking the line of Elizabeth Warren or Obama, really criticizing the big banks. And so this is a big issue.
I want to get Ellen Chesler, a Hillary Clinton supporter, to respond.
I was at one of those Goldman Sachs speeches, and it was about foreign policy, completely about foreign policy. And the entire fee for the speaking went to support the Clinton Foundation. And this raises a big question, in my view. I mean, I think America needs to do a little bit better by its ex-presidents, because we've put them in a situation, and President Obama is going to be in the same situation, where in order to support unless they're individually wealthy themselves, which is very rare, in order to support their lives after being in office. I mean, these offices no longer allow you to kind of fade away to the Supreme Court, or as has been in the past.
But you said the money goes to the foundation, not to them.
So the money supported the foundation, almost all of it. I don't know exactly the numbers, because I'm not inside.
Well, Lee Fang, what about that?
So that, I mean, again.
Well, let me ask. We only have 30 seconds. Lee Fang, your response
I believe
to that.
The Clintons have said some of the money has gone to the foundation, but the vast majority of it has personally enriched them. They've, released their personal ethics disclosures, and it's clear that the Clintons have made a lot of money, tens of millions of dollars, as I mentioned, earning over $115 million from the speaker circuit over the last 16 years.
And then they've given it to the foundation. This is truly
unprecedented.
Well, we're going to have to leave it there, but we'll continue to explore this, of course. Lee Fang with The Intercept, Ellen Chesler with Roosevelt Institute, and thanks also to John Nichols from The Nation. This is Democracy Now! We will be covering New Hampshire. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for joining us.